Emissary Proops, Eric wrote this. If you were conscripted to fight in one war from history as a common foot soldier, in which war would you least wish to fight? And I said World War I. I said Civil War. I said that Alexander's men loved him. I said Napoleon's men loved him. And my wife reminded me, hey, Greg, why don't you just fucking write a Frank Miller comic book since you forgot all the women leaders, the Amazons and whatnot. Now, these wouldn't be armies that I would least like to be in, but I'm talking about armies where the army had, as they say so popularly, a fanatical devotion to their leader. And one is Joan of Arc, whose birthday was last week. In fact, about 5 days ago, I think. What is it, the 6th or 7th? It kind of moves. Look at Joan of Arc just for a second. 600 years ago she's born, right? She died at 19. There's no evidence whether she even had a period. A lot of people like to say she was a man, which is horrible. She wasn't a man. She was a girl. She was quite likely illiterate, not particularly couth, as we would say, since she was raised way out in the country. A giant tree stood, I don't even know until this century, that she said she heard the voice of Michael the Archangel underneath. And by the way, went to the fucking fire saying, I heard those voices. To the end, she would not recant that part. And she's an emblem of everything that's good and right and true, right? I mean, we like to put women in different characterizations, right? Either they're the hot chick and, God, I'd like to bone her, and then I'd like to cheat on her and then have babies with other women, you know? Or, oh, God, she's 38. She's so old. What a ragged old thing. I could never get with her because, oh, my goodness, you know. And then there's the, what's the line in the First Wives Club? There's 3 ages of women in show business. Babe, DA, and driving Miss Daisy. Yes, I'm quoting the First Wives Club, which is a very good movie, goddammit. I like the First Wives Club. All the vodka bottles in the garbage can, and Goldie Hawn says, I had people over this weekend, and Bette Midler goes, who'd you have over? Guns N' Roses? It's funny. It's funny. It was a 90s movie. That's why Guns N' Roses. It was the 90s. And in any case, you know what I'm talking about. We put women in different categories. So everybody likes to put Joan of Arc in these weird categories and infer all this stuff about her. Let's get to the facts. 600 years ago, during the 100 Years' War, England had France on the goddamn ropes. They didn't have a crowned king. They were cut up into a million different fucking duchies and principalities and whatnot. And she went from her village to the local fucking magistrate, got him to help her, got all the way to the fucking king. When she got to the king's chambers, she was admitted. Another guy was sitting on the throne, and she went, that's not the king. That's the king over there. And she identified him, right? Without knowing. There's no photographs then or drawings of the fucking king. And that king was a pretty weird, indolent, little kind of wimpy Charles. He gave her the army, and they had been able to overthrow the English. In a couple of weeks, she was able to do what the army hadn't been able to do by organizing the fucking troops. This is a 17-year-old girl. So let's not diminish her by saying she was a man. Let's not diminish her by saying she had a dick. She didn't need a dick. She had what Prince called a pussy control. Are you ready? She got an army of salty, seasoned fucking French dudes with maces and crossbows to womp shit for 2 fucking years on the English, got all the way to Reims, had the king fucking crowned, was there at his coronation, then was captured by the Burgundians, turned into the fucking Inquisition, and then you know the rest of the goddamn story. There's a book that you can get. It's at Book Soup at the Counter, actually, here in Los Angeles, and it's just all of her writings, meaning all the things she said when she was on trial, right? Because there's a detailed transcript of her confessions and that were extracted from her. And she said quite a lot of things. A lot of the things she said in her lifetime were written down by other people. Speaking of a fanatical devotion to the troops, she said, explaining her generosity to the poor, I've been sent for the consolation of the needy. When was the last time you heard a leader of men say that? Obama never says it. Yeah, that made the room go fucking quiet. It's true though, right? It's true. Shouldn't he say that? I mean, Lyndon Johnson used to say things like that. Lyndon Johnson used to say the poor need help and stuff like that. He was president too. You never, ever hear a president say anything like that, or even a politician, very rarely. You do hear people say it, obviously. Joan speaking to her captains. You've been at your council, and I have been at mine, right? Hers. Now, be assured that the counsel of my Lord will fulfill itself and prevail, and that yours will fail. To Father Pasquale the night before the attack on Terrell, rise tomorrow very early, earlier than necessary, and do the best that you're able. It will be necessary to keep always near me, for tomorrow I shall have much to do and greater need of you than I have ever had. Tomorrow, the blood will flow from my body above the breast. Joan speaking to her host in Orleans, the moment of the attack on the Terrell. Keep it until evening, because this evening I'll bring you a Godin and will return by way of the bridge. That's a trophy. Joan of Arc speaking to her soldiers during the battle. Have good heart. Do not fall back. You will have the Bastille soon. Right? The Bastion. That's her yelling at her troops. A teenage girl. Joan's only comment about Orleans later at her trial, since her judges tried to avoid the subject. I was the first to place a scaling ladder on the bastion of the bridge. Remember how I always talk about Alexander being the first goddamn nutcase fucking general up the fucking rope? Joan, I was the first. Leading an entire army, arrows, mind you, picture a battle in the 1400s. Boiling oil has been prepared above the ramparts by insane English people. Flaming pitch, the Greek fire, right, is coming over the walls in catapults. They are throwing turds. They are throwing rocks. They're throwing bits of metal. Whatever primitive cannonade they've got, they're using that as well. Crossbows, right? Windlasses that have very tight tension that they can fire an arrow through someone's fucking armor are flying everywhere. Fucking spears are coming down. Pikes, lances, halberds, every manner of goddamn projectile weapon and missile is flying. And Joan fucking walked up to the rampart of the bridge and put the fucking ladder and was up first. And she didn't always carry a sword. Sometimes she carried a banner that said the honor of God on it. Yeah. Because she was a badassador. Yeah, fucking A. And then recovering from her wound and seeing the army in retreat, my standard. Here we go. Illiterate and uncouth, This is the part I love. To avoid having to use her sword, she led the army carrying a 12-foot-long banner. The party of the kingdom of heaven is what it said on the banner. Witnesses said she was luminous in battle. Light, not glinting off her armor so much as radiating from the girl within. Her enemies spoke of clouds of butterflies following in her way. A curiously beatific report from men who said she was in league with the devil, right? They always said she was, when they tried her, they said, it wasn't the Lord you heard, it was the devil and you're his tool and shit. The English thought she was fucking devil incarnate, man. They hadn't lost a battle. In the aftermath of combat, she didn't celebrate victory, but mourned the casualties. Her men remembered her on her knees weeping as she held the head of a dying enemy soldier, urging him to confess his sins. Her courage outstripped that of seasoned men-at-arms. Her tears flowed as readily as any other teenage girl. That's awesome. She is, along with Saint Denis, Saint Martin of Tours, Saint Louis IX, that sainted king, and Saint Teresa, one of the patron saints of France, captured by the Burgundians, sold to the English, tried by an ecclesiastical court, burned at the stake when she was 19. She asserted she had visions from God that instructed her to recover her homeland from English domination. Late in the 100 Years' War, the uncrowned King Charles VII sent her to the siege of Orleans as part of a relief mission. She gained prominence when she overcame the dismissive attitude of veteran commanders and lifted the siege in 9 days. Fucking A, man. You brought a teenage girl to lead the army. 9 days later, hey, this is all right. There's plunder and booty. The Passion of Joan of Arc by Carl Dreyer, which I've never seen, and many people are applauding for it here. A masterpiece. Maria Falconetti is supposed to be. I watched a clip of it last night, and it was extraordinary. I have to watch it now. Mark Twain was fascinated by Joan of Arc and wrote, she is easily and by far the most extraordinary person the human race has ever produced. Under a pseudonym, he wrote the personal recollection of Joan of Arc by the Sieur Louis de Conte. Twain said, I like Joan of Arc best of all my books. Not Life on the Mississippi, not The Innocents Abroad. Fucking Joan of Arc was the book he liked best. It furnished me, and he was not, as we would say, uncynical. Mark Twain had a jaundiced eye, baby. Jaundiced eye. 12 years in the preparation, 2 years in the writing. The others need no preparation and got none. He said about all of his other books. And I'll remind you of this. You can read it for free online. One last thing about it before we get off Joan of Arc. And really, you can't spend enough time talking about Joan of Arc. They had a big birthday party for the other day in France. And Sarkozy came out and everything, right? And he feebly tried to align himself with Joan of Arc, even though, you know, we all know he's no Joan of Arc. First of all, her dick was much more fruitful. And then the right-wingers got together near a Joan of Arc. You know, that's always going to happen. They always liked it, because she liked the Bible and whatnot. When we reflect, her century was the brutalest, the wickedest, the rottenest in history since the Dark Ages. We're talking about the 15th century. We are lost in wonder at the miracle of such a product from such a soil. The contrast between her and her century is the contrast between day and night. She was truthful when lying was common speech of men. She was honest when honesty became a lost virtue. She was a keeper of promises when the keeping of a promise was expected of no one. Does any of this sound familiar to anyone? Does the 21st century have any smack of the 15th century at all to anybody? She was a keeper of promises when the keeping of promises was expected of no one. She was honest when honesty became a lost virtue. We live in the world now where people say, what did Santorum say the other day? Well, I don't want to give black people the money and have them give black people money and then they don't have to work for it and whatever. And then a few days later when I didn't say that. But we saw you say it. It's on tape. We heard you say it. She gave her great mind to great thoughts and great purposes when other great minds wasted themselves on pretty fancies or poor ambitions. She was modest and fine and delicate when to be loud and coarse might be said to be universal. She was full of pity when a merciless cruelty was the rule. She was steadfast when stability was unknown, and honorable in an age when forgotten what honor was. She was a rock of convictions in a time when men believed in nothing and scoffed at all things. She was unfailingly true in an age that was false to the core. She maintained her personal dignity unimpaired in an age of fawnings and servilities. She was a dauntless courage when hope and courage had perished in the hearts of her nation. Spotlessly pure in mind and body when society in the highest places was foul in both. She was all these things in an age when crime was a common business of lords and princes, when the highest personages in Christendom were able to astonish even that infamous era and make it stand aghast at the spectacle of their atrocious lives, black with unimaginable treacheries, butcheries, and bestialities. That's what makes her so great. And that's what makes people now that stand for something so great. We live in the same kind of time when crime is the common business of lords and princes. Just change lords and princes to modern things like businessmen and government officials. And you know exactly what I'm fucking talking about. This is not a time of honesty and transparency. This is not a time of good and rightness and great thoughts and great purposes. This is a time of icky venality and lying and capitulating and compromising and bullshitting. And everyone who stands tall in this era deserves that kind of respect. And that's the kind of person Joan of Arc was.